Greetings from Washington, D.C. at the National League of Cities Conference. I'm Cameron Diehl, the director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, here with Irma Esparza Diggs, who is with the NLC lobbying team on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. So Irma, tell us about what your team is doing right now. How big is your team, and how do you advocate for cities on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, thank you. So as Director of Federal Advocacy for the National League of Cities, I lead a team of 10, including myself, 8 lobbyists, and 1 grassroots engagement director.
We know at the conference this week we've been talking about infrastructure and the hashtag Rebuild With Us. Tell us what NLC is prioritizing on Capitol Hill for federal investment in infrastructure.
So the National League of Cities is prioritizing our infrastructure efforts and really the need and the call for Congress to pass a comprehensive infrastructure package that will provide much needed relief for cities across this country who have been dealing with the infrastructure deficiencies related to water systems, roads, bridges, desperately needed broadband networks. And so our effort really came out of the need to educate not only members of Congress, but this administration about how much cities are already doing, how much we work with states, how much money we are putting into meeting existing infrastructure needs, but without an additional federal investment, there still is a deficiency there, and cities just can't meet that gap alone.
What has been the reaction with members of Congress about the infrastructure effort?
Well, members of Congress are completely supportive. They understand that they have their own infrastructure priorities, and given their close relationships with many of our city leaders in their respective districts, they understand that this is something that we've got to put our heads together and figure out. There is definitely bipartisan support to support water-related infrastructure packages for the reauthorization of brownfields that allows for the revitalization and economic development of land that currently isn't used. And so we are optimistic that we can work with Congress to overall ensure that we get the funding needed to pass a comprehensive infrastructure plan that would have a dedicated funding source, whether it be the gas tax or other user fee-based systems. We've got to figure out how we pay for this, and I know Congress, it's a $1 trillion question, not only for us, but for Congress, and given they just passed a tax reform bill that provided major tax cuts, we're all trying to figure out how we pay for it. But we're encouraged by the President's leadership on this. We're encouraged by the fact that leaders in the Senate and the House are talking about it, actively holding hearings, and so we're going to continue to do our part, especially this week. We have over 2,000 city leaders in town, and we are going to be taking our message, not just these last couple of days, but specifically on Wednesday, to meet with members of Congress in the House and the Senate, and particularly key members of authorizing and appropriations committees, to ensure that we keep that ball moving forward.
Our mayors and council members who are with us here in Washington will be meeting with our congressional delegation on Wednesday. What else can Utah city leaders do to assist in this effort?
Yeah, well, Utah is a key state. It is a state that has large and small cities, both heavily populated urban areas as well as rural areas. So it really is a good representation of what the infrastructure deficiencies across the country are, what specifically cities will need, because as you know, there are some cities in Utah, even if they had new money to put in, they're definitely willing to do so, but the reality is that they don't. So how do we help support those cities who don't have additional new money to meet infrastructure priorities? How do we communicate that message to Congress? That's important, and we need to hear it directly from Utah leaders on what those priorities are, but also what are the obstacles, what are the impediments to getting their infrastructure needs met.
Terrific. Well, thank you to you and to your team for your advocacy on behalf of cities. Are there any other issues that you anticipate in this Congress that will directly impact cities?
Yeah, so the budget is an ongoing budget and appropriations. Conversations will always impact cities because the appropriations, the budget bills include funding for federal grants, such as the Tiger program, which is a transportation-related community development block grants, New Start programs, WIFIA, which is a workforce investment funding program. So there are a number of federal programs that are important and that cities leverage for additional funding to not just meet public safety needs, but also meet economic development needs. And without that funding, cities would have to shoulder that responsibility. So we want to make sure that cities don't have to do more with less and can count on a strong federal partner to meet their local priorities.
Terrific. Well, Irma, thank you for your time today, and thank you for your advocacy on behalf of cities across the country, but particularly in Utah. So we at the Utah League of Cities and Towns are proud partners with NLC and look forward to continuing to work with you to push these priorities forward. So thank you for joining us. This is Cameron Diehl, with the Executive Director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, saying thanks for your time and go cities. Remember, the government closest to the people governs best.
Thank you, Cameron.